Hola Chicas! Welcome to 20 Questions With, a podcast in conjunction with Latinitas Magazine. Latinitas Magazine is a strong voice for Latina and POC youth, which is why the hosts of 20 Questions With are all young Latinas who are looking to gain experience in innovative and creative fields just like you. In each episode, you'll hear from striking individuals who are inspiring today's youth with their passion, motivation, and grit. Today, join Angelique Hechavarria as she sits down and asks 20 questions with leadership strategist and legacy builder Talia Fox. Before we get started, here's what you should know about Talia. Talia is the CEO of Kusai Global, an organization that designs and delivers executive training for diverse industries. She has transformed thousands of executives over the last 2 decades in every sector, including health, education, technology, and government. Kusai Global focuses on educating the public on pressing issues such as equality, emotional intelligence, and cultural competence while strongly advocating for women and people of color. Nearly 1/3 of women say they feel discriminated against or are treated unfairly at least once a week based on their gender. The normalization of sexual objectification contributes to this harmful discrimination and often is disregarded in the entertainment world, workforce, and beyond. Let's get to know Talia and hear what she has to say.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of 20 Questions With. I'm Angelique Hechavarria, and I'm here with our co-host, Elisa Garcia, and today's guest, Talia Fox. So let's get started with the questions.
Elisa here. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with the first half of the questions. Looking at and researching you and your LinkedIn and the Kusai Global website, I wanted to know if you could just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in your current position.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Elisa and Angelique. What a great podcast, a chance to talk about how we can know better and do better and live these awesome lives. So I am the CEO of Kusai Global. And what that means is I'm an executive leadership strategist. So I work with some of the top leaders in our nation and around the world. And I go into these organizations and these businesses, and we talk about what do we need to be focusing on a regular basis, what actually matters. Now, that's what I do, but it doesn't necessarily reflect who I am. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I am a person that is obsessed and committed to both being successful and maximizing my potential and being happy. So I spend a lot of my time in our company thinking not just about work and not just about what we need to do to impact the world through business, but I think about what we need to do to be happy and to thrive and to connect in more meaningful ways with each other. Kusai, our company, it's an acronym for knowledge, understanding, strategy, implementation. And it's an acronym that I've been using in my life for maybe almost 20 years.
Wow, thank you so much for that answer. And you kind of touch on Kusai already. And so that leads perfectly into my next question is, what is the goal of Kusai Global?
The goal of Kusai Global is we want to change the world. And so it's interesting. Our values at Kusai it spells out relief. So relief is another acronym for respect and equity in the world. The L is for love and leadership. The I is for integrity. The second E is for excellence. And the F is for freedom. And so again, our goal is to transform organizations to not only thrive and do better, but I also want to transform organizations to be able to see the value in people that look like you and me, and to understand how the future looks colorful and bright and joyous. And so I want organizations to tap into the potential that exists all around the world that have sometimes in our history have gone ignored for just way too long.
Wow, thank you for that powerful answer. And I know that we're going to get to some of those deeper questions later on in this interview. So thank you so much for already touching on that and thinking ahead. And you mentioned the goal of Kusai Global. And I know you're a leader at the top, and I know your day can probably look different a lot of the times. So the best way you can you describe your typical day for us?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of my personal typical day. And this will be helpful because I'm really big on habits, which, by the way, I love the book Atomic Habits by James Cleary, if any of you want to pick it up, because our identity and our success is really on the foundation of our habits. So I start off early in the morning and I do about 30 minutes of meditation. And during that time, I really just kind of let go of any doubt and any fear. So my mantra every day is there is no room for doubt or fear, that I am going to be thorough and be focused and calm throughout the day. Then I get on my Peloton. A shout out to Allie Love and the Peloton instructors. I love my Peloton. I do about 20, 30 minutes, or I lift some weights so that I can strengthen my body. Then I have a nice cup of coffee. I eat a really healthy meal, and I start my day for work at Kusai. And what it really consists of is I ask myself every day, what is one thing I can do today to help someone feel uplifted or the same and not diminished in any way? And so I challenge myself to have important conversations with people, not just about work, but about who they are. I have this reputation for when I talk to big leaders, usually we get on a call and they want to get right into work. And I'll say, wait a minute, let's just stop for a minute. How are you? We're going through a pandemic together. People have children. We have lives that we're living. And so as human beings connecting, I really encourage, and I don't have conversations if we can't have a connection. And then after we have connected and we understand who each other is, then we move into work. So in addition to that, I read a lot. I probably read over 200 books a year because my work consists of reading and then turning that knowledge into something that people can use.
You mentioned something there that really touches to me, which is talking to people as people first and then getting right to it. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed. Even though I'm a mentor with Angelique, I don't view Angelique as like a mentee. We talk all the time about anything and everything, and she's 7 years younger than me. So I think it's something that has definitely helped our relationship. So that really goes with me a lot. So thank you for saying that. Another thing that I always like to ask just innovative individuals and in these positions of leadership is, what did you envision yourself when you were younger? I know I didn't envision myself going into journalism at all. So what does that look like for you when you were younger?
I love that question because I actually do this exercise. I was a therapist, by the way, before I became an executive strategist. And I do this exercise where you kind of write a letter to your 8-year-old self, right? So you think back to when you were 8 or 9 or 10 and what were your dreams, what were your visions? So for me, I wanted to be an actress and a singer. There's actually a videotape of me where someone asking me what I want to be. And I just started talking about how I want to be on the stage. Interestingly enough, people don't know this about me, but I'm actually an introvert. I really get my energy from being alone. But I love when I do connect with people, I show up in a very meaningful way and I'm very focused. But I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to work with people. I always envisioned that maybe I would do some level of performance. My father's a reggae artist, a calypso artist from the Bahamas. And so I used to help him. How I got into entrepreneurship is I used to actually help him manage the singers in his band. And I found out later on in life, my father has a very thick accent. He also was illiterate. And so a big part of my entrepreneurship journey is at 8 years old, I had to read contracts from my father. And I thought he was training me, but he really was using me for he needed help, really translating and figuring out what these contracts were about. So I feel like now I definitely do a lot of creative things and there is a performance component, but it turned out even better than I could have imagined because in addition to the performance component, I really feel like I'm able to support and help people, which for me, it's a well-lived life if you can give it all away.
Thank you for sharing that bit about your family, especially with you having to read the contracts with your father. You mentioned how you thought it was like training you. My grandma has a very similar story where my great-grandfather owned a little market here in South Texas, and she will tell me, as a little girl, he would put her up on the counter and he would have her read the newspaper to him. And that's one of the ways she learned English since her first language was Spanish. And so it's interesting that's something I hear a lot from maybe multicultural homes and generations that go back.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's a lot of synergy there. The Latinx community being able to get leadership training early on, really playing this very integral role in supporting parents and transitioning and grandparents.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you've been doing this strategist role for a while now. So what is your favorite part about this part of your career?
Well, I must say, I'm going to be very honest. I do enjoy making money. That's always fun. For those of you that are working hard and doing your career, we want to help people. We want to be supportive, but we also want to live lives and support our families. I'm a single mom. I have a 20-year-old and a 13-year-old. And so what a gift it is for me to be able to support my family, my core family, and to be able to provide a lot of opportunities for school and college for my children. It's actually something I never imagined that I would be able to do, particularly just my background. I come from very, very meager means. And so that is great. The second part that I just love in terms of the work is I am never bored. So we go into organizations and I get to analyze. I feel like I'm a part of a constant reality show, a more positive one that has better outcomes, but where I just get to go in and like see what's really happening in organizations and troubleshoot as to what we can do to know better and do better. So I love the thinking part and this ability to figure it out as we go along. Some of my colleagues hate that about this work, the fact that it's so unpredictable, but it really is my favorite part.
I can definitely relate to, especially with communications and journalism, there's a lot of unpredictability, and I can totally understand why that's not somebody's favorite part. Sometimes I feel like I've met people where like that's their favorite part because it's that adrenaline. They have to figure it out from scratch. And I know some people really thrive off of just figuring it out from the bottom and then to the finished product. So what challenges or obstacles have you faced to get to this point in your career, and how did you overcome them? I work for a women empowerment org and predominantly Latinx, so there's a lot of talk about imposter syndrome and just not feeling adequate. So did you go through similar things, or maybe not, but how did you overcome any of those challenges?
Absolutely. And thank you for saying maybe not, right? Sometimes we make assumptions, people go through things, but they don't. But I think looking at me being young in my career, I can be ethnically ambiguous, but being Black in my career and being a woman in my career, I have had a ton of challenges. So I'll tell you a really quick story. So when I went to do my leadership fellowship at Harvard, I did a big keynote speaking event, and I actually was leading for 10-year professors. It was one of the retreats. I was speaking for almost 4 hours at this big retreat, which is a huge deal at Harvard. And I was coming out of the bathroom, and one of the professors started asking me all these questions about what I needed to do to clean the bathroom. So he was like directing me to where to get the toilet paper, and he was like just telling me all these different things. And then he even handed me some trash, and I was the keynote speaking person. Now, this is a real complicated thing for me because I also don't want to diminish how important that work is or to feel offended by that, because I think it is really important work. But as you all can imagine, it was extreme unconscious bias. I also was dressed up in a suit. I had my pearls on. And so I was very kind of just confused about, did I look too casual? Did I look like I was like, cleaning the bathroom? So it was this thought. It turned into a great story. And the obstacle that I had to overcome is not be resentful toward him. And after I did my talk, I actually had a conversation with this gentleman, and we became colleagues and friends to this day. And I'm very proud of it because I was angry, right? I was angry at first and a little bit resentful. And so not being resentful and being helpful and forward moving is really important. Another experience that I've had is sometimes I'll be at meetings and I feel like I'm being ignored. So I've been at meetings where literally I'm the youngest, I'm the only minority in the room, and I've been in meetings where I have the triple threat. I'm also the only woman. And so there are times where I have tried to speak up and I'm completely ignored. And so another strategy that I've had to use, and I teach about this, is that I will not be so offended to where you throw me off my game and I lose my confidence. So I will keep trying until you let me speak. And at some point I will literally say, excuse me, I have something to say and I think it's going to be valuable to your organization. And I brought up this fact in the group. I said, can you all coach me on the best way to be heard in this meeting, right? Because I've been trying to get my word and I don't want to deprive you of my value, right? And so I'm not wanting to be heard because it's an ego thing. I'm wanting to be heard because it's going to be supportive to you and what you're focusing on. And so I have such a long list of so many microaggressions and bias, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's subtle insults that I could go on and on for days. But those are just a couple of examples of just really having to overcome the doubt and the fear and keep focused on the goal and the prize.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. I know I was mentally taking notes of things that you said in case that ever happens, which no doubt I'm sure that's the way life is. But I think something that you said that I really liked is you not being resentful. It could have been very easy for you to be mad at him, but you weren't, and you turned a bad situation into a good situation. And that is actually something that I hear from a lot of good leaders. One of them from being Jane Goodall. I know she works a lot with like in the environmental field, of course, right? But I watched a couple documentaries with her. And one of the things that she mentioned, which is very similar to what you just said, is, you know, a lot of people question why she works with these big chemical companies or like that go against what she teaches. And one of the biggest things that she always says, her rebuttal is, she's like, why wouldn't I work with them? Those are the people that need our help the most or that need our guidance the most. Like nobody's going to win the conversation if I'm getting mad at them. And so that's one of the biggest things that I've heard from great leaders. Thank you for sharing that. Talia, I saw that you have a background in English, psychology, and theater. So how do you use those backgrounds to help you at Kusai Global?
But what's critical about going to talk to people in STEM is what's your it factor? I feel like it kind of the universe supported me in figuring that out because the spoken word in English, being able to speak and write effectively, critical in business anytime you're in business. So invest time in any communication strategy. I would say a good 30% of your time should be in communication skills, 70% in your technical skills, particularly if you have high-level technical skills. The second thing is my background in psychology. There is no wasted time. When you think about understanding human behavior, understanding what makes people tick, understanding how people connect and thrive together is critical. And then lastly, this investment in being a little bit entertaining. I told you I wanted to be an actress, and I did go to acting school while I was in grad school studying psychology. I went to acting school in New York. It was so fun. I think it's the same school that Danny DeVito went to, and Denzel Washington might have trained there as well. But it was wonderful because I learned confidence, how to be on stage, and I actually learned the art of authenticity. Really quick story. The very first day in acting school, the professor just starts clapping her hands, and we were confused. We're like, why is she clapping her hands? Nobody's performing. And she said, all of you have been acting all of your lives, and now you've come to acting school to learn how to be authentic. So just a little tidbit that's probably interesting for your listeners is a good actor actually genuinely feels the emotion. A bad actor is one that tries so hard, tries to be somebody else. So essentially my acting training was training and learning how to actually feel authentic emotions and how to be more authentic. Probably ironic where people feel like acting is faking it, but to be a good actor, you can't fake it.
Yes, and I feel like I've read so many stories about actors and their method acting, and I'm just like, okay, this is all making sense now. And another question that I wanted to ask is, in your opinion, because I know this answer can vary depending on who I'm asking, but in your own words and your own thoughts, what makes a good leader, especially one and those who aim to empower girls and women?
Absolutely. Well, I hope that all leaders will aim to empower their people that they lead, including diversifying, which would be girls and women. For those that are specifically focused on girls and women, I think what makes a really good leader is a leader that really understands what the big picture is in their main deal. What's important about leadership is not in the weeds. And what I mean by that is it's not about all the little stuff. It's not about managing people. It's not about managing projects. It's about understanding what motivates people, what develops people, and studying strategies in order to do that more effectively. Another thing that makes a good leader, and I'll have to invite some of your listeners to one of our training, but I call it something called systems thinking. Systems thinking is the study of a system and feedback loops. And so what that means is that you take a look at what's going on in your life and you study which parts have the biggest impact on your success. So as a leader, you take a look at the big picture and you study which part has the biggest impact on success. I struggle with my weight my entire life. It's been just an up and down. I got to a point where I've lost over 100 pounds over the years where it's just been up and down. And so I actually use leadership skills in order to impact my health. I finally met all my health goals. I exercise regularly. I eat really healthfully. But I realized that there was one part of the system that was very, very critical in my success. And that is my level of stress and how much sleep I get. Now, for the novice person, they just focus on eating and working out, and you just spend your time trying to figure out how to do that, how to make yourself do that. But there's probably something else in the system that's really impacting your ability to be successful around what matters. So leaders really figure out what matters, where are the problems, and what is the part of the system that makes the biggest difference.
Thank you for that. And congratulations on meeting all of your health goals. That's amazing. Looking at something as essential and everyday as, sleep and stress. Sometimes that's what it really comes down to. My next question is, and this might be something that you do at KUSI Global when you're giving classes, but what advice would you give to women who are facing gender inequity or inequality in their personal or professional lives?
Great question. And I'm glad I introduced systems thinking because this is going to be the advice. So here's the skinny on inequality, on racism, on inequities. It is very important to look at the complexity of it. So if we're in a situation and you're observing, you feel like you're not being treated fairly, there's a lot of different parts of that. It's not just one global thing. And so what a lot of people do is they notice they're not being treated fairly and they have two things that they do. They either get mad or they shut down. And so what do you do with that? So the question that you have for yourself is, what do I need to do to develop to make sure that I'm doing everything that is in my control and power to be most effective and to be on the top of my game, right? A lot of people say, well, we shouldn't have to be on the top of their game. I said, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is right now. I'm working on it for you to make it so that it's an even playing field. But for now, we all have to strive to be our best. And it's just the way it is. And you won't regret striving to be your best ever. But then the other thing is, what parts of this are maybe related to me being discriminated against? So let's just say you're going after funding for your business, right? And you keep getting no. Is it inequality, or is it that you haven't had access to, because inequality happens if you don't have access to the same mentors, to the same quality of a pitch deck, or the same quality of work. And so access to the A game is a part of the inequality. So the question is, don't focus on the person that is discriminating against you, focus on the access to the A game, right? And so again, if you're experiencing this in your life or your work, as you observe these realities that are happening, and I won't diminish it in any way, just challenge yourself on, what do I have control over and what can I do and who can help me overcome these pieces? I have worked with people that I could almost safely say that they were on the borderline of being very biased and they discriminated against minorities in organizations. And I created a power plan. I figured out who's their boss, what's important to them. I've actually worked with people where I put them in a situation where they had no choice but to yield to the power. And so we have to be strategic and we have to hold ourselves accountable for the things that we have control over and keep doing our best as the world begins to evolve and change. Because I have seen in the last couple of months, a lot of positive changes within organizations.
Thank you. I love that you mentioned being strategic and just going to the boss and then, making them have no choice. That's pretty funny. And you kind of already touched on this, how you ended the previous answer, but now you can kind of go a little bit more in depth. But in what ways have you noticed women reclaiming their voices, and how does one start to do this? Does it start by, just waking up one day and just realizing, hey, this is something has got to change? Or does it start slowly and, maybe going to talks and conferences and meeting other like-minded individuals? How does that start?
Yeah, so I like the conversation reclaiming your voice, because I say this very harshly to a lot of people that I coach, where they'll say, I want to say something, and I'll say, why? What is the purpose behind what you want to say? So reclaiming your voice is getting smart enough, which means doing your research, silently observing, so that you can craft language that really supports and aligns with what you want and what your goals are. Sometimes, this is what I've learned in this space with a lot of us, is that we want to be passionate against something, but we don't really have a goal, right? We're just kind of speaking up and sharing things, and that's okay in certain areas. But when it comes to business, where's the value add? What is your goal? And what is your communication strategy? So reclaim your voice. When it comes to just being who you are and reclaiming things that are important to you, that also can be communicated in a way that aligns with who you really are. Sometimes people are so passionate about things that they actually become, this is going to sound a little complicated, they actually become inauthentic. And I'll tell you what I mean. Let's say I would have, when that guy handed me the toilet paper, let's say I would have gotten really upset at him and, I don't know, even said something rude. The reason that's inauthentic is because that's not who I am. I am kind and connected. And so by behaving that that way, I just allowed that situation to tap into not my authenticity, but to tap into my inauthenticity. I'm kind, connected, and strategic. And so really understand who you are. Figure out what you want to say. Does what you want to say reflect who you are? And does it align with what you want in life and where your goals are headed? Really important. And only you can decide that. Don't let anyone impose those answers upon you.
Thank you. And I swear I'm taking mental notes of all of this. So thank you so much. And that was all of my 10 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Angelique for the last half of our interview.
Yes, thank you so much, Elisa. So Angelique taking over now. So I was wondering, what advice would you give on how to avoid falling into the traps of different systems that justify rationales when it comes to gender and race?
Yeah, so that's a really kind of complex question to unpack. I think that when it comes to gender and race and racism, that there are two different lenses. There are lots of lenses, but there are two different lenses for us to take a look at. One lens is we see everything that happens in the world through gender and race. That can have its own trap because what you're looking for, you will find, right? So if you're constantly looking for the impact of race and gender in every single thing, you'll probably find it. The other extreme of that is that you don't see the world as it is, and you don't see the impact of your gender and your race on things that you do. So you feel you're just oblivious to the realities of the world. So back to this concept that I talked about with systems thinking, in that there's something called a mental model. And a mental model is basically how we see the world and how we define our vision of the world. Like what's your perspective? And here's the deal. There is a reality. Some people say there's not a reality, there's just perspective. There's a reality. When you start looking at data, racism exists, sexism exists, right? We see it, we know it exists, and there's a reason it exists because we are living in a world with a history of it, and we're still healing from all of these systems that have actually been designed with the intent of oppressing both women and minorities, right? It definitely is baked into the system. At the same time, with that mental model, we need to step back and observe reality and the feedback loops before coming to conclusions, right? So you try a couple of things and you see, is this a part of a racial and gender issue? And if so, who can I get support? What will I say? How will I reclaim my voice? Or is it this area where I need to develop and hold myself accountable for, again, tapping into my strategy and tapping into my A game? There's no easy answer to it, but this is why we sit back and we watch to see what's actually happening. We're in a world where we're so quick to judgment, we're so quick to assumptions, and it doesn't do anyone any good because sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But we have to let the reality and the outcomes guide our wisdom around what to do with racism, inequities, and sexism and bigotry and all the other isms and issues that we are facing as people, particularly as women and as girls.
Yes, thank you for that. And when you mentioned about healing, I definitely feel that we're in that point of time of healing. And it goes in relation to my next question, which is, what are the first steps you would recommend women to take in order to heal from past experiences with gender discrimination?
Can we just take a moment? I just want to take a moment and just send out a lot of love and light to you and to me and to all of us that have experienced discrimination. It is hard. We are human beings that just want to do our best. We want to be respected. We want to be liked. We want to feel included. We're humans. This is the psychology of human behavior. And many of us have just experienced situations where we have felt alone and we have felt isolated and we have felt like you just don't have a fair shot. And that's just no fun, right? It's really hard to have it in the back of your mind that no matter how hard you work or no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to get to the heights and maximize your potential. So I just want to take a moment to just breathe that in. So how does healing happen, right? So how do we actually let go? How do we let go? My first step would be to just accept and acknowledge what you're feeling and what has happened to you. Whether it be, I'm angry, follow it all the way to the end. Allow yourself to be as angry and as frustrated as you want. Sit down and just allow it just to be and just notice it and observe it. And then if you could just take a moment, once you've gotten to the end, so you're kind of sitting down, can you just take a deep breath and say, I'm done. It's a new day. It is time for me to stand up, to reclaim my voice, and to reclaim my confidence. The past does not control my present. The past does not control my future. And I am expecting amazing things to happen to me as I move forward in this world. There are a lot of people in this world that are doing things intentionally and unintentionally to oppress others. And there also are a lot of people in this world doing amazing things to help help you. And so I am going to send all of you this message to take today, which is I want you to imagine that every day when you wake up, that every single person is conspiring for your greatest good. Everybody is just out to help you and out to see you soar. And this actual magazine is a part of that group. And so singularly focused on all of those people that are lifting you up and supporting you. And don't allow the presence of all of those people that are not, because they do not have a right to occupy any rent or any space in your mind or your heart.
Thank you so much for that. That was so lovely. Do you have a meditation podcast?
I don't. We'll have to tell Justin about that.
Would you be able to talk about the unconscious bias towards women and marginalized groups?
Yeah, so I love to talk about unconscious bias. The reason I love to talk about it is because I feel when people are more aware of it, it decreases once the awareness happens. So let's just quickly define unconscious bias. So unconscious bias is something that every single one of us has. It is our brain's natural sort of habit to put people in categories. And actually what's interesting about that is that we can't get rid of that. Back in the day, it was a way that we protected ourselves, is our brains are very efficient. So we don't have time to gather all of the information about everything that we see. We actually need to go ahead and quickly make some choices. So for example, if you were out seeing a tiger, there's no time to figure out if that's a really kind and loving kitty. It's best to assume danger and get out of there, right? And so this is how our brains are designed. So for those of us, which are all of us, have unconscious bias, it's very important that there's not necessarily, no shame in that. However, because we are these evolved beings, once we see something, we notice that we're putting people in categories, right? There is this next level where we have an opportunity to behave in a particular way. And it's with that action, the actions that we take is our opportunity for change. Unconscious bias happens in organizations in the hiring process. Unconscious bias happens in promotion. When you get into an organization, some people are left out of really important conversations, which is why you get to a meeting, you have no idea what people are talking about, right? Unconscious bias also exists in the kinds of work that people get. So, if you get two people to a particular level where they're about to be promoted or in their organization, there are some people, particularly women of color, marginalized groups, that literally did not have the same access to information. And so they literally are behind. And sometimes they are less qualified, but nobody is talking about what the factors were that created that. So when you're excluded from the conversations and from the team and from the information flow, how will you get more information? And so what we need to do as women and girls is make sure that you are really tracking and that you have information. We have to put a little more effort to know what's going on so that we can be prepared to kind of thrive and add more value in organizations. So I'll stop right there because I could go on and on about unconscious bias.
No, that was wonderful. And I think that's a very relevant topic because I feel like my community has dealt with that, not having direct access to certain things and struggling because of it. So that's very important. Thank you for that. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on today's progress towards diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think that there's a report that came out called Diversity Wins by the McKinsey Group, and I'll talk about it from a corporate standpoint, and then I'll talk about it a little bit personally. But there actually has been some progress. They looked at 15 countries, about 1,000 different companies, and they found about a third of them are making progress toward increased representation, particularly in leadership. And here's what they found. This is really cool. Organizations that are leaders in diversity and inclusion outperform their peers since 2014 to 2019. In some cases, depending on if it's gender or cultural and ethnic diversity, 48%. So that means, and when I say outperform, I'm not just talking about getting clients, I'm talking about outperform financially, right? So the data really, really supports the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion are critical pieces to organizations thriving, right? So very important. So a third, though, is kind of bleak, right? There's a third making progress, really leading, and they are actually enjoying the fruits of those efforts. 2/3, though, are lagging behind, right? 2/3, in some cases, has only been a 1% increase in gender representation in high leadership positions. Across the globe, there's been about a 2% increase in gender representation in leadership in other countries. So it's really slow. And we're talking from 2014 to, so that's 5 years, a 1% increase, right? That's kind of bleak. But there is a show of progress. As we all know, with recent events, as we had protests with the murder of George Floyd and all of these other things, as many organizations and many people are starting to take a stand, and not just marginalized groups and people of color, but what it's going to take to really get progress is everybody has to be involved, right? Everybody has to take ownership of what's happening in our world, in our businesses, in our country. And so the more people get involved, the more progress we are going to make. As long as we think that it's about just individual people and their experiences, or you think it's about hurting people's feelings or those kinds of things, this is not a philanthropic situation. This is a world crisis that we have to all be a part of, and it's affecting the outcomes that we have across the board.
Yes. And what's one important thing you have learned throughout your professional career?
So, of course, I run a learning organization, so I've learned so many important things. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to say that I like to bask in the wisdom of uncertainty. So many people get scared in life because they don't know what's happening next. And your greatest goal, or our greatest goal, is to figure out what's happening next. And so when I'm feeling a little scared or anticipating what the future is like, I remind myself that uncertainty is beautiful, not knowing what's coming next, because anytime you don't know what's coming next, you are in this space of unlimited possibilities. And so if you're ever being afraid of the future, afraid of where your career is going, afraid of what's going to happen, just allow yourself to think about what you'd like to happen, all the possibilities that have yet to unfold.
Oh, I love that. Is there someone or something that inspires you?
Well, you all inspire me when I see you giving your time and your energy to helping others and to sort of building them, elevating the mind and inspiring the heart of women and girls. I'm inspired by that. We all have our own personal lives that we're living. We have our own issues. We have, I went through a breakup right before COVID, and it's just like, it was heart-wrenching in terms of relationship. Like, we're all just dealing with life, right? I know people, they've had loss and grief. And so for those like you that despite everything going on in life, that we wake up in the morning and we think how we can serve is just inspiring. And I don't judge those that cannot, because life is hard sometimes. Life is rough. But those that muster up the courage and the energy to pull people along and to help those in need, I am forever inspired by the will and the courage and energy to serve others.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And I'll definitely say, along with that, to also be easy on yourself, so that the pressure can sometimes get to you. I know for myself, being a senior in high school, it's been getting to me lately. But talking to you and talking to the people in this magazine has been so uplifting. And I wanted to ask you a more lighthearted question. What do you like to do in your free time?
So, Angelique, I have started something that's really hard, but I love it. And I have started bachata dancing. And I love it so much. I love it to the point where words can't express how much I love it. And I'm actually starting with sensual bachata dancing. Just this idea of being one with my body and just being able to kind of just move and freestyle. I absolutely love it. So that's what I've been doing a lot more in my free time. And then I'm also trying to read more fiction novels. I like to think about love and romance and those kinds of things. So that's always fun. So I'm trying to kind of get my groove back of just being flirty and sexy and just, authentically me. So I'm kind of trying to reconnect with my soul, if you will. So I'm starting with bachata.
I love that. I grew up, my father is Cuban. When I was growing up, he would teach me all these dances, bachata, salsa, merengue, cumbia, all these different. So I grew up a lot going to these parties and dancing bachata. Oh my gosh. And that's always so much fun. So I love that. And where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Well, I see myself with, I don't know, some sexy man doing bachata dancing on a beach, but that's that's a whole nother podcast that we could do. But in the next 5 years, which, by the way, back to bachata really quickly, I started off with my sneakers. I'm in heels now doing bachata. So that's my new goal. So for the next 5 years, we have really big goals at KUSI Global. So we are expanding. And so I want to scale. We just hired a major executive leader that's kind of running our organization. I also am trying to finish my book called The Power of a Leader's Love. And love is listen, observe, value, engage. So I'm finishing that. And I just want to be able to make sure that I'm using my time very concentrated in the areas where I can have the most impact. So I'm still in this world where I do a lot of things that probably aren't the best things for me to spend my time, but it's kind of par for the course. And so each year I'm working on what can I take off my plate that takes me away from my real purpose and my real focus. And so that's where I am in my life and in my career.
Yes, thank you for that. And I hope that you complete everything, all your aspirations to the fullest. And I was also wondering, what resources or advice would you give to young girls who aspire to become a CEO?
Fabulous. Well, thank you. And right back at you, Angelique and Elisa, right back at you. We're all lifting each other up and supporting each other. So how do you boss up is the question, right? Moving toward the CEO. First of all, congratulate yourself if you have it on your list right now of aspirations of being a CEO. Because, I coach a lot of people and I ask them, well, why not be the CEO? And they say, oh, no, I don't want to be that at the top. So if you are a person that is aspiring to be a CEO, you have already completed 90% of the battle. So let's talk about the 10%. So the 10%, there are 3 skills to focus on. One I already shared with you, which was your systems thinking. So this way you have to think about how you think. Are you thinking like a CEO or are you thinking like a person that's riddled with doubt and fear? So bossing up means that you are decisive, that you are focused, and you are also willing to learn and observe what's real. Very, very important. The second thing is invest in communication skills. Can you clearly communicate your thoughts, your vision, and can you inspire people? And then lastly, probably the most important skill to master on this journey to a CEO is a concept called emotional intelligence. And many of you have probably already heard of it, but emotional intelligence is a greater predictor of success than just IQ or technical savvy or smart. And what that means is this ability to be self-aware and to manage yourself, the ability to understand other people and to manage other people. And so being able to manage your emotions and have the patience along the journey really is going to divide the winners. We're never the opposite of a winner, but for those that are taking a little longer to get to the top.
Yes, and thank you for that. I can't wait to tell my friends about it because we're always talking about becoming a CEO and managing a company and business. But to our last question, if you could meet anyone from the past or present, who would it be and why?
So I already had a chance to meet Oprah. So normally I would have said that. It was really cool. She's very inspiring, of course, and continues to be inspiration to so many people. I don't know, probably from the past. I'd like to meet some of the great leaders, like maybe even a Mother Teresa and ask her some questions. I'd love to kind of have coffee one day with Nelson Mandela from the past, like those kinds of things. If I was able to just meet people, of course, the Obamas would be great. I actually have a list where I imagine, there are these past people, if I could go back and they were still alive, that I would love to meet with. But then there are these people that are present that it would seem it would just be really nice to have them over for dinner and just chat, right? Would be so much fun. So interesting people that have done things, and I'd like to know kind of what their fears are and what they still think about once they've arrived and achieved so much success.
Yes, thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you for all that you're doing for the community.
Interested in pursuing a career in media, make sure to visit us at latinitasmagazine.org for more information. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of 20 Questions With. We'll see you next time.